Welcome to today's CTC Civil Project Suite webinar. Today we are going to be talking about our Pipe Designer tool in our project suite. As we go along here, if you have any questions, put them into the question panel and we will get to those after the presentation. If you are watching this on YouTube, which this will be recorded to YouTube shortly after the webinar, put those in the comment panel and we will get to those, get back to you on those questions as well. My name is Tony Crick. I'm the Civil Product Manager here at CTC Software. With that, let's get going. So today we're going to be talking about our Pipe Designer tool. It's one of the tools in our project suite of tools, and it's built to help with the design of your pipe networks. We can do a lot of things with it. We can edit slopes, inverts, elevations. We can do all that directly in the drawing with the entire network or selected parts, however we see fit. And then it has real-time control. We can see what's happening. So there's no need to open any of the multiple dialog boxes you need when you're editing a pipe network. I think we all know how cumbersome that can sometimes be. Well, this tool doesn't do any of the creating of the networks. You already have to have the networks created, and then we can help you refine those when things change, when your designs change. So as I said, it's part of our CIM Project Suite of tools, which is intended for the everyday Civil 3D user creating design and production drawings. We are currently on version 26.1, which will work back into the Civil 3D version, including version 2022. So today we're going to see how we can automate some of our network editing, how it lays out in there, adjust plan runs efficiently, which will help us to create accurate pipe runs and overall improve our underground utility design workflows when using our pipe networks. So Pipe Designer will help you to edit the slopes and inverts directly in your plan and profile views by selecting those. We can update entire pipe runs, and we don't need to open any of those dialog boxes. With that, we can see them happen in real time, and we can adjust all of the pipes automatically with slope continuity if we choose to do it that way. In addition, we can modify multiple pipes all at once, apply those uniform slopes and elevations, which will eliminate the repetitive manual calculations and will help us see our pipe networks as they are developed. With that, we should be able to maintain the precise depth and clearances that we're looking for, visualize and verify our edits dynamically, and avoid the slow, error-prone tools, the pipe properties and structure property dialog boxes that we sometimes have to use, which will help keep our pipe data and Civil 3D geometry synchronized because it works straight in Civil 3D, and we can edit the large complex networks, which will leave us to focus on our design and quality and not that tedious data entry. So let's jump into a drawing and let's have a look at our Pipe Designer. Okay, Pipe Designer lives up here in our project suite of tools. So we just need to open this. If you have our tools, you already know how our dialog boxes work. They're all very similar to help with your workflow. So first thing we have to do, if you see on the command line, we hit the tool and then we have to select our pipe networks to get it to go. So we can select any portion of this, the whole run, as I've done here. when it first opens, you're going to get it looking like this. Once you set it how you want it, it will always open that way until you change things. So a couple things right off the bat for those of you who aren't familiar. We have this pull down, which is really just this in a pull down form, but we can also check our suite licensing, report a bug if we want to, request a feature, which we always encourage, and then our about and videos are back up here the same way. So if you need any help, this will open our help manual. If you want to see a video specific to this tool, you'll click this. It will take you to our YouTube page, and you can choose from any of the pertinent videos that are out there, of which this will be one shortly after. If you need any help, push this button, and the About simply tells you what version. I mentioned we're on version 26.1. If you don't have it, you can click this button right here to get it. If you don't have our tools at all, you can click here to go get it. So let's walk through this a little bit and see how it works. So the first thing is our options. Let's go through that. And that's what sets this up right here, your grid format up here. So remember the size and position of the main window. That's this one right here. It will open in that spot every time if you have this selected. Our highlight rule violations is going to focus on this. If you have rules applied to your networks, you're going to see your violations right here and highlight. If I turn that off, I won't get those. They go black. So I have mine on all the time. In addition, you can see over here in the rules, I'll show you that in a second. So then we have our precisions right here, which will set how we want our table format to be viewed. I can set it to my current drawing precisions if I want to, all the way out to 8. Current drawing precisions, I have mine set to 8 because I'm that way. If you want, you can have it set to whatever you want. So I'll set it back to 2 right here, which will get us a little easier format. So these will read out to 8 places, as you see right here, if you need to be that precise. And then as we move down the line here, we have our pipe center, which is going to check for cover at our pipe centers. So if we're applying pipe cover rules to it, or if we just want to make sure we're not violating anything, we can turn that on. And then this will be supplemental to your the intervals, however you have your rules set. We can set this to look in any increment we want. By default, I think it comes with 5. You can set it to whatever you want. I'm going to leave that at 5, but you can set it to 10, you can set it to 2, however you want to look for those. And then here we have our columns to display. So this just simply chooses what we want to see here. If I turn everything on, as I go down here, this will fill the entire grid. And if I tell it to say OK, right here, I see everything. And whatever we see here in white, we can edit. So these are all editable fields within the selections that we have chosen here, which we'll get to in a second, including we can rename our structures and our pipes. In addition to that, we can organize these if we want to change how we look at these. So if I wanted my drop to be next to my sump, I could say this. I could cut this column. I can place it here, and it will be there, and it will stay there every time I do this unless I set it back to something else. So if I open this back up again and I tell it to set back to defaults, you're going to see it jumps back to where it was. So by default, this is what we give you to choose from. Again, set it however you want to. Let's go through a little bit more of this, how this looks. So let's start here with the reselect. So I have this selected. If at any time I want to reselect some of my structures, I can if I want to work on just this section, for example. I can do that. I can work on them one piece at a time, one pipe at a time, the entire network at a time. In addition, I can work upstream or downstream. If I just hit this button right here, it was going to ask me if I want to save this. I'm going to say no right here. I didn't do anything, but I could change, well, here, let's just do it. So I say yes, and all it did was reverse the order. Okay, so it's upstream or downstream. There, it reversed back. I really didn't do anything. So that's what we have set right now. Let me come back here. I'm going to set this back to my default, say okay. In fact, I'm going to remove my status. No, I'll leave that there in case we need to see. We'll show you what these are violated. So when we see the highlight in red, it's telling us what we violated. There may be other things there. So in addition to that, let me reselect. In addition to that, we can zoom to a new area if we want to. So if I hit my zoom right here, I hit zoom, I can zoom to anywhere I want. I can zoom if I want to look at that lateral portion in there. If I want to look at just a certain section of it, I could do that. I'm going to zoom all the way out again. I'm going to just hit my reselect to get, so you guys can see this. All right, there it came. So I'll just reselect the entire run once again. And that's what we see. In addition, we can use these, we can come here and we can zoom to them in plan, we can zoom to them in profile. So if I zoom to it in plan, I can zoom to it in profile. I can see that again. So let me hit the reselect so I can zoom back out. So you guys can see what's happening. So in addition to that, we have our undo and our redo. This will work for most things. It does not work if we do set to minimum cover. That we have to escape. We'll get to that. So then we have our methods. The next is our methods. So we can do this by editing slopes. This will allow us to edit these numbers by slope, and then what do we want to match? Match our inverts or match our crown obverts. Matching crown obverts is going to make this section available. If I don't have that, this means nothing. So when I do this, this is going to turn that on. In addition, I can set it to edit elevations. When I set this to elevations, I can edit the things you see here. And this is controlled over here. So in this case, I have it set to structures by sump, so I can control the sump. If I set it to invert, I can control the set to invert and control my inverts. Likewise, with the pipes, I can do the same thing. You see how this turned on crown, crown. I'm going to set it back to invert. We'll get back to that in a second. So by crown invert, for those of you that do this, or obvert, I mean, for those of you that do this, only available when the edit slopes is on. If we're doing this, if we're doing for crown matching method, it can do what it's going to do, okay? It's going to calculate by the drop factor, bring both of those into play, the drop factor and the constant drop, and the factor. And it's going to calculate the end of the elevation of the outgoing pipe. And that's going to be based on a formula that you can find in the help manual if you want to see it, but it's simply pipe elevation 1, which is then, and pipe elevation 1, incoming and outgoing pipes, and then subtracted by the drop plus the factor. When we have match crowns, so if I'm coming here and I have the match crowns, then it's going to behave a little bit differently. So when that's selected, the values are going to be determined by the property that will be controlling it. And then it's going to be calculated to take into those accounts, and then changing the values after the fact won't change anything unless you change it back to the inverts, and then that will kind of bring you back to square one, so to speak. So then choosing the constant, that's the factors. The choosing constant drops, that's going to set the values as specified and calculate everything in the table that you have included here. So if I was doing a simple section of it, it would take care of that and skip over the rest of it. So then our pipe run editing. The next important part to how we want to do it, I'm going to set that back to inverts. You see how these column headers have changed here. I'm going to set that back to invert as well. So we can do some other things. We can apply rules, or we can apply these individually by structures or by pipes, or we can turn them off altogether and not use any rules. So if we wanted to apply those, I would just select both of those if that's what I wanted. I'm going to hit my apply rules. And you see how these rules have changed right here. Okay. So if I turn these off, I should be able to undo out of that. Oh, here, let me cancel and turn it back on. So some of these things we cannot undo, as I mentioned before. They're not going to happen. So let me cancel out and I'm going to discard the changes. Do I still want to cancel? Yes. Then I'll just reselect. So I'll pick the entire run once again. So now you see that all the values have gone back. Okay. And if I set the rules column over here, if I turned the rules set on, I can see what rule sets are applied. If I had different rule sets applied, they would show up here. These are all set to the same, just basic, generic for this one. I'm going to turn that off, keep for compact. I'll leave the status on there. Okay, the next is to interpolate the slopes. So what this is going to do is this can interpolate the slope between the upstream that we selected and the downstream pipe. So we can set these to do in individuals. Even though all the pipes are selected, I can still do these in chunks if I want to. I can do it from manhole 1 to manhole 5, let's say. And if I tell it to interpolate the slopes, hopefully you can see this well enough, but you should see a change and our slope numbers should change there as well. So once I say interpolate slopes, you see some of these numbers have changed. And if I tell it to apply, they adjusted slightly. I don't know if you guys can see that back there, but they changed the slopes right there. So from there, I can undo back out of those. And it's going to go from bottom to top all the way back up. I hit apply again, and it's set back to where we were. So I can do that also. I'll just do it from end to end to show you. We'll hit that again. If I hit, say, interpolate slopes, we're going to see a constant slope, taking into account this invert and this invert right here. So these two inverts, and I'll tell it to interpolate. Now you see all of the slopes have been changed to negative 0.79. I tell it to apply, and they're all going to jump back down. So if I want to undo, I can just start to undo back out of that and tell it to apply again, and it's going to put it back where I wanted. Now I couldn't be able to pick out which ones I undo. I could reselect and do that, but as if I just hit the reselect and pick them, that would change just those. Okay, so next is minimum cover. So setting to minimum cover, we can change this value however we want, and this plays with this right here. So at intervals along, I'm gonna get checked, do some supplemental checking at the pipe centers. So this is gonna apply to all of the pipes that I have selected in my run. It's gonna ignore the slopes and edit the part elevations to minimize the pipe cover. Okay, it's gonna check at the ends only unless additional locations are selected in the options, which I did. So it's gonna go every 5 feet, and it's gonna come up with whatever slopes, inverts that we need to maintain that minimum cover through here. When the method is set to slopes, the drop ends will be held constant, which we have right here, holding the minimizing the pipe cover. If that makes sense. Okay, so let's just run it. So I'll set it to, let's put it at 5, just to see, and I'll say set minimum cover. See a bunch of numbers have changed. Does all the calculations for us. So if I tell it to apply, now it's going to run parallel to my surface at my minimum cover. If I change this again back to 8, if you watch, you should see these numbers start to change. Set to minimum cover, tell it to go. We see our inverts have changed, tell it to apply, and it puts the pipe back down there. Now I'll note one thing when we do this. If the inverts were way down like they were when we first started this, those inverts are not going to come up with it with this version. Even if I have it set to sump, they won't come up. Now we are going to incorporate that into our next release, that if they're coming up, and then we will be able to have those update instantly without having to go back in here. Another way to do it is to come here and tell it to lock the invert. Okay, if we didn't want our invert to change, if I set this to invert, I can also set the invert to lock at the sump. All right, so let's run that again. I'll hit to lock the sumps. I'll run it again. And now these didn't change. Okay, but if I wanted those back to not have this sump, if I set this to back to sump, then I can adjust these globally. So if I want them all to be 0.1, I can just grab it and drag it down. They're all going to be 0.1. I tell it to apply, and they're there. Okay, so that's how the pipe inverts work. If we're doing it by crown obvert, it's going to connect at the tops, and then it will take into account these drop and constant factors, if that's how you're designing your network. Let me say okay out of here, and then I'm just going to undo to get it back at a mess. So now we're back to the mess that we started with. Open up Pipe Designer again. Select the entire run. Okay, some other things we can do is we can do this manually. Okay, we mentioned that before. So if I'm doing, I'll set this back to inverts, and I'm going to match my inverts as it goes along here. So if I want to just run a whole entire run of slope right here, and I want it to be, let's set it at -1, kind of like we did when we set the rules. The rules did that. We can also do this manually between any number of pipes. I'll set that right there. And we'll see that it dropped right there, keeping in account that these inverts are matched. If I drag this down so it's 1% the entire way, it will take care of it right there. And we can do the same thing with our inverts, and we saw how we did it with the sumps. And that gives us a lot of control over what we can do. So let me check my notes, see if there's anything else. Right-clicking, we talked about that, and the zoom to. So that's really pretty much all I had to show you guys today. I hope you got a good understanding of how the tool works and the different settings, how they all work together here. So with that, again, it's part of our project suite of tools, currently on version 26.1. We also have our manager suite of tools, which is intended for CAD managers or those of you who might be supporting a CAD group. In addition to all your other work, if you don't have it and you would like to get it, or you have any questions, contact us here at CTC Software. Also, we appreciate any ideas you have that can make our tools better. Contact us here. We build our tools for you to help you do your jobs with less clicks and make them more accurate. So again, thank you for joining us here today. If you're watching this on YouTube, we appreciate you taking the time to watch it there as well.